Hi, everybody. Oh, thank you, thank you. Well, leave the applause to afterwards, please. A good conference so far? You enjoying it? Not tired? Not too tired to go into philosophy? Not? Let's see if this works out. No, but I really love the conference. I've enjoyed every talk so far, and I recommend everybody watching this later on, go to KanDDDinsky. It's a really good conference, right? Everybody? It's a good one? Yes. Fine. Now, actually, I usually am quite nervous before doing talks. I still am. I never get rid of that. But this time I'm actually understanding what Kent Beck was talking about at the keynote at the Understand Europe, is that when you're excited, you can sort of hide some of that nervousness. And I feel I can now, because I don't think I've been so excited to talk about this for any other conference or any talks I've done. It's brand new. And I took a little bit of a leap. As I said, philosophy is not my... I haven't been educated in philosophy, for example. I remember doing one course at university, one that you have to do. And I was so glad when I finished that it's just about not failing it. That was sort of the aim. So it's a bit odd that I actually end up standing in front of you talking about philosophy. I don't know if it's an age thing. I don't think so. I think it's the path that I've been through, actually. And it started here, incidentally, in 2018, where I gave a talk about business capabilities. And I structured the talk like, say, how did I get to the knowledge about, or sort of the insight about what we could use business capabilities for? I'm not going to repeat that, so you have to Google it if you want to find out. But as sort of an insight I had was that I moved into system thinking. And if you move into system thinking, at some point you're going to realize that system things are not a practical thing, really. It's more about the conceptual thing. It's about how you frame things, how you look at the world. And when you're into that, in sort of epistemological space, you're in philosophy. That's basically what you're doing. And doing that research, I came across something that I'm going to share with you today, and I can promise you all, I think everybody here, is going to learn something today. That's a good one. That's a good promise, right? Yeah. At least it was a aha moment for me when I got through this. And the inspiration for this title was that, I mean, I guess we all acknowledge that we have different perspectives on things. With different histories, different backgrounds. We come from different cultures, different religions, you name it, right? And even if you come into a company and you meet, so I work as an architect predominantly, and when I meet another architect, at least a few years ago, I thought, oh, maybe we probably see the world the same, right? We are architects, we've been through similar things. Of course, we appreciate the same things that we are that are popular. Kubernetes, for example. I mentioned Kubernetes. But that's not the case, is it? Very often, even esteemed architects that have been around for a long time have very different opinions about things. So much so that they even someone infighting, and you're fighting over who's right and stuff like that. So why is that? Because it's lockdown. Good one. No, but this was sort of I wanted to, that's what made me curious about this thing, to dig a little bit deeper. And while studying open system theory, which I'm actually going to mention a little bit today too, but not too much, because I've talked a lot about that in other talks, but they base their insights on a guy, which I'm going to go back to later, which is highly philosophical. It's even meta-philosophy. It's a philosophy of philosophy. So be ready, people. So why do I find this problematic? Have an idea why I use this? Any guesses? How do we implement organizational changes, for example? We implement it, right? We install it like it's software. We just have to do it right, and then everything is going to work out. Spotify model or whatever it is, even team topologies. As we heard earlier today. There's a challenge that meet all the time when you do that. And also, so we sort of, and it's like, is it because people are stupid? I would say no. Even consultancies are not stupid. They may be after the money, but they're actually trying to make the world better. I think they come into companies actually believing what they're selling is true. It's not some may look at it as snake oil, but I don't think of course they don't see that themselves. They see it as, of course, I have this perfect thing that's going to work out perfectly for you. I have the exact right thing to sell you, right? So why is that? Why do people do that all the time? So I want to go a little bit deeper, understanding why is that? And this is where we got into the deeper end of philosophy. And frequently we end up thinking like mechanically, right? I bet you all thought of that. Why is that? Why do we think? Actually referring to we, as Abraham said earlier, we here. And we are basically all of us from natural science or a science engineering background, aren't we? Anybody not from engineering or natural sciences? No. Oh, there's one. Yes, you bring an important perspective to the table. So why is that? I mean, we can't think otherwise, because we have trained in that since we actually grew up, basically, but especially in school. Right? My whole education about mechanically thinking, determinism, science, scientific method, all that. There's more to life. There's more perspective to look into. So, and just said, as I said, not stupid, and I sort of alluded to that sciences actually use mechanical thinking. Have you heard about determinism or superdeterminism from science? Where you believe there's actually some term called Laplace's demon. Anyone heard of that? It's a thought experiment that said if you know everything, every position of every particle in the universe, you can predict the future and predict what happened before. You can predict everything. You have full insight. What happens to free will? Don't know. That's a big, actually, discussion point. So we're actually going to sort of come back to that later on. But actually, people believed in a clockwork universe. After the Enlightenment, and especially, particularly probably Newton, they believed in a clockwork universe. They believed that universe function as a clock. It's just about our lack of knowledge. If you knew everything, you could predict everything. So I came across something that is referred to as world hypotheses. And that was sort of the foundational ideas behind open system theory, as I mentioned earlier. You Germans have a different word for it. I think it's Weltanschauung. Is that correct? We have a similar word in Norwegian, probably because Norwegian is quite close to German, which is called Anseelse. It's very similar anyway. So it's you can interpret it as translate as a worldview. It's okay, but I think Anschauung is kind of it's a better word. And the idea is that this guy identified 4 of these separate things. And they are called relatively adequate world hypotheses. So it's not saying they are perfect, but they're adequate. And he identified 4. And the first half of this talk, we're going to go through these, because that insight is so deep, if you understand. Hopefully I'll be able to carry that across. This was a book he released in 1942. So I'm going to be the guy once again that brings about this old knowledge. But it is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I think you're going to agree on this. Yes. And he said that the basis of these world hypotheses are based on what he called a root metaphor. Let me read this. A man desiring to understand the world looks about for a clue in his comprehension. Right? You want to understand how thing works. He pitches upon some area of common sense, fact, and tries to understand other areas in terms of this one. Right? It's like you have a schema in your head and look at these things and you imply the same schema. The original area becomes the basic analogy or root metaphor. So we're going through this. You can recognize all of these. So let's go through these. As I said, he identified 4. There are probably others, and others have been identified later on, but I think this will suffice for now, these 4. They will cover a lot, these 4. So let's start with the first one, formism. That's an old one. That goes way back. And the root metaphor there is similarity. You look at what are this thing and this thing, what's the similarity between them? Can we abstract it into something new? Abstractions, right? Talk about that. So the idea here is that what form do things have? Take or have, right? And what similarities are there about? For some odd reasons, I've seen oranges being mentioned here a lot when you read my materials, but like say an orange is round, it's orange. So is it then a ball, basketball, that's round, it's orange? Well, how about the American football then? That's orange. It's a ball, but it's not round, right? These are all the abstractions that we make all along. So this is a silly example, but you get my point, right? So when we do modeling, we do this, right? We take on that hat when we do that. So, for example, the tiger. So we get into some issues here then. Tiger and a tabby cat. They're quite close, right? Different colors, yeah, mind you, but they're not stripes. They're both cats, but they're very different. You want to approach them very differently, at least. And if you haven't listened to Einar Høst's talk about model and reality, or reality versus models, I think it's called. I did it at my Introduction on Europe, at least at the year. He talks about horses, the horseness of things. And it's a zebra horse. It's very close, but it's a horse. So we talked about that a lot. Just a homage to his great talk. But we also do it in business. As I said, modeling was one, right? When we try to model things, entities, for example, we try to create abstractions and all that stuff. But we also use, when in the business, I said that people have shoppers, we create personas, right? We create like the archetype people we want to sell to. So we reduce people into specific things that are similar, right? In segmentation. So don't assume that formalism is, many think of formalism, that's old things, because they often refer to us for what Plato did and Aristotle and the Greeks and all that stuff. Still used it all the time. So that's one. I'm going to walk quite quickly through this. The other one I'm going to mention is mechanism. And that obviously by its name is newer than formalism. Formalism, like I said, goes way back. Mechanism comes with the machine, because this root metaphor there is the machine. And then the important thing is that how are things related to other things? So it's about relations between things. It's not the shape necessarily, but you focus on the relationship between things. Again, I just want to highlight, say that specifically, that all these metaphors are applicable everywhere. They're good at something and worse at something else, but they're not bad. They're actually, as you said, relatively adequate, all of them. So you can use it for everything. So the machine is about integration predominantly. So then here we have cause and effect, right? Here you have science, or mechanistic thinking and science, which is I illustrated this way. So natural sciences is square here. It's all about determinism. If it's not determined, can be determined, it's not good science. And we actually create an environment so we get this predictability. Create an environment, that means we abstract again. We take away something to make it work. Like the feather and the hammer. Doesn't work here, it's work on the moon, but it doesn't work here. It's like, so that you have to reduce it so it fits. That's what we do there. And we also do it in business. We believe in processes. That if you start something, then you're going to end there, and da. So I use the waterfall model here as an illustration. We do that, again, all the time. So then we're into the mechanistic way of thinking about things, right? All right, that's mechanism. And then we have organism, a little bit harder to pronounce. The next two are a bit more vague. The other two we had, they're quite concrete. We can use examples. The root metaphor is very concrete. But here it's a bit wishy-washy. And that's why I used quotes. Pepper didn't use quotes. That's me. But organism, he actually said in the book that he didn't like the organism way of pronouncing because it gives the wrong association that it's about animals or beings. But yes, that's a root metaphor, but it's not really about that. It's about integration, so he liked integration better. So again, similar to mechanism, it's about how things integrate. So how do things fit in a totality? So here we're into system thinking, right? The other ones we had parts, here we think in totalities, and then a whole consists of parts. For example, a human. Right? There's a lot of parts in it, but we start with the whole human and then we break it down. That's how you do organisms in thinking. Or you had evolution, something that grows, because it's organic, right? It evolves, it's self-replicate even, self-organized in some situations. And a lot of system thinking belongs here, or at least feels that they belong here. I'll illustrate this with system dynamics here. So at least a lot of the early system thinking was actually in organism system way of thinking. They were thinking of like an organism that evolves a lot. Even organizations use this metaphor, right? There's heads, their bodies, the head thinks, the rest of the body just do, and stuff like that. All right, the fourth one, which is, well, we're moving way into abstract now. And this is probably where Pepper had the biggest contribution. That's what it's called contextualism. And here, the root metaphor is even harder to understand. It's a historical event. And it doesn't have to be history, but it's an event happening in a timeline. So it can be now and a future back. But it's something that happens. And it's contextual, as the name illustrates. So an event that happened in one context would not be able to replicate in another context. That's what this gives. So what is this event in this context? Is the way to look at these. So how can you look at this? So history is one, right? When you look back at history and say what shaped us, as I said earlier, what makes us us is predominantly our history, what we've been through, right? So that's the historical events that made us us. So made you special for me, for example. Right? Or you have, as I said, let's probably use that for the personal diary. What makes you you? Highly personal. And also this. You see in this illustration, use the domain-driven design, right? The blind man and the elephant. So it's about context and what you experience that makes you understand the context that you're in. So as you see, it's a lot more vagueness, but it is a different way of looking at the world than the other three. So we end up with 4 of these, as I said. But it's not by accident that I put you in a 2x2 matrix. Because there are some commonalities. You can wait for the pictures because you get more information soon in this picture. And that is, first the philosopher. Actually, he connects it to philosophers, how they thought. So you got Plato, as I said, on formism. You got Descartes on mechanism. You got Hegel on organism. And you got all the pragmatism and contextualism. Pepper himself was a pragmatist, true and true. So he came from there. So just keep that in mind. Not that it matters that much, but still. But if you look at these 2 on the left, they are both analytical. You look at the parts, and then you identify the whole. So the parts are basic, the whole is derived from the parts. That's what analytical means. If you hear talks by Russell Lakoff, he talks about this a lot. He said that before system thinking, he was analytical. So then we belong. So both these 2 worldviews are very like pre-system thinking. Because on the other side, you have synthetic. And with synthetic, it means that the whole is basic, but the parts are derived. So it's flip. Akervo often talks about if you take the system thinking, you have to flip how you did it before. You don't replace analytics, but you flip it. You start with the whole and then look into the parts. So right side, system thinking, the other side, before system thinking. We want to call that. But there's also a dimension, another dimension that Pepper sort of identified. And these are the vertical one. And the top one is dispersive, we call it. It means that all the things that you look at, they are not necessarily connected. And if they're connected, or if there's a relation to them, it's probably accidental then. So it doesn't come a priori that there is a relation between things. They're just spread around. Which means that accidents can happen, or like unpredictable things can happen. Emergence, for example, can happen in that sense. The other one is, where is it? Yeah, so then he uses the, he said that there is an inadequacy in having that. And in the inadequacy, but dispersive is in precision because it's spread. So you don't necessarily have the full picture, but you see a wider picture, but you don't have the precision necessarily in that space. The other one is integrative. Then you look at how things are integrated. And they are a priori integrated, which means that you can expect things to happen. So chance never happens here, because it's highly integrated. Facts are assumed to be integrated. Which then means that then you have inadequacy in scope instead of position. Now you have the full picture. Now I can take a photo of it. I think you have. Yeah, there's actually a slide more. Yeah, but a slide more is actually for me, not for you. So let's look, we all realize that formalism and mechanism are important, but I'm way more into system thinking, so let's focus on the two on the right, because I think they're more relevant for us. Well, actually, as you said, we do formalism too, but just be aware that you're doing formalism when you model and create abstractions. So look at these two, because the distinction between them is really interesting, or actually more interesting, the lack of distinction between the two. Pepper talks a lot about that people confuse these and assume them to be the same. He actually says that the only contextualism is organism just dispersed, and vice versa. So the only difference is the way that they are dispersed, which makes contextualism even harder to understand. Right? If you thought you knew what contextualism was, it makes it even weirder. So I spent quite a bit of time to understanding this, but I think I got it. So as I said, they are very different. The only difference is how they integrate. Say if there are elements and you look at things, how they integrate. So it's the difference. The top one, dispersed. The second one, very integrated. So you wouldn't have a human with a heart over there. Right? So you understand my point, right? It's very integrated. But it's also about time. And this was a massive aha moment for me, though. And also an argument that I see clever people have. For example, Mike Jackson had an argument with Marilyn Emery, which is kind of the woman that drives open system theory from continuously, still do, is that time is misunderstood. In the top one, time is integrated into it. Like in a historical event, time is built in. You can't get away from time. You can't remove time for the top one. The bottom one, time is still there, but you try to remove it. When you describe a human, you don't put him in history, right, or him or her. You just describe the human as an organism. Time is there, but it's not that important. So I actually try to get rid of time a lot of times when I use that mental model or worldview. Yeah, and also, I heard somebody talk about complexity earlier. I'm not going to go full on Dave Snowden and complexity science or CAS, but where do you think complexity belongs? Like proper Dave Snowden complexity. Is it on the top or the bottom? Anyone want to guess? Top one, yes, top one. Because it's historical and it's unpredictable. Bottom one is actually predictable. Is system thinking? Yes, but it's a predictable system. It's a deterministic kind of system. Way more than the other. There are still variants there, and people evolve differently and all that. But if you put on the organism, you kind of want to get rid of that time and that complexity, the unpredictability, because history doesn't really matter in the bottom one. And somebody heard about emergence. You've probably heard that mentioned here and again. So what is emergence? If you ask a scientist, they will say, yeah, okay, I can accept emergence as long as it's weak. Have you heard that? Weak and strong emergence. They accept weak emergence if it can be simulated. Then it's okay, right? Okay, it doesn't exist there, but if you can make a machine with a programmable and you can simulate it, fine, because then it's reducible, right? It's deterministic in a way. The strong emergence, never. Only time you can hear and scientists accept that there is something called strong emergence, we talk about consciousness. That's the only thing that I feel like, okay, we don't understand consciousness, yeah, maybe that's strong emergence. But a lot of scientists will also say, yeah, but we just don't know enough yet. We just have to figure out how the neurons works, and then we're going to figure it out one day. So they probably believe in general AI, something like that. I do not, to be honest. And then, let's see if I have some time here. Oh, I'm going way fast. You're probably going to be let off early today. What about systems then? I mentioned open and closed systems. Well, actually, I mentioned just open system, but open and closed. Since we have time, I don't have to talk too fast. I can interact with you guys. Which is open and which is closed? Are they both open? Are they both closed? Is one more open than the other one? Open, closed? All agree? Yes, that's what I think too. So there is a big distinction between having a closed system and an open system. And what Marilyn also said is that you can't go both ways here. If you take on the organism way of thinking, or closed system, there's no way you can get to open system. Because you already decided that it's closed. How can you open it? You can't, by definition. If you start with the open one, you can abstract and decide, okay, this time I'm going to close it. That's fine. And then you can, so this one directional. It's a bit tricky to understand, but if you play with the idea a little bit, you're probably going to. Oh, and this is also one of the big distinctions between people, and they argue about this stuff. But I think I've got it. You can't create something when you're in the closed one. You can't add things, but you can abstract, take away things when you're on the top and go down. So if we decide that a social system, this one, I like to look into social system. I must admit that's my favorite preoccupation at the day, because I want to create better organizations for you to work in. And then social system is the most important bit. And it's a highly complex system, unpredictable, and all that stuff. So it's an contextualism is given almost there. So if we do this, if we close it, then we have consciously said that we have abstracted away something. That's what science does. It takes away the environment. Again, Einar Høst, I love him. He also had a brilliant term called the terrarium. He says that the teams in the organization are living in a terrarium. Management creates a terrarium for them. Like, box them up and let them work solely and alone, because that's what they are paid to do. You don't want them to talk to the customers. Crazy with developers talk to customers. Right? I think Dave Snowden actually said that's easier to treat the customer to learn to speak to developers than the other way around. So you have this way of thinking of people is horrible. One of the things why it irks me about Snowden, by the way. So if we are just given, it's an open system. If we close it, we take away something. And the way that organizations do today, they take away the possibility to people in the team to affect the environment. They're actually closing it off. No, you good, Trond, you're not going to talk to the customer. No way. We asked marketing to our customer relation or whatever to do that. You never talk to I've never been asked never to talk to, but you know what I mean. You never get the opportunity, and it rarely does. I have been able to listen to customer service once in a while. That's it. You can sit in listening to what they're talking to the customers. That's it. No more. So if we assume that the system, that we just join me now. Assume that it's open, that everybody in this social system are able to do whatever they like, need to do in order to make whatever they are doing work. That's an open system. So if they are building something, they have to be able to do whatever they need to build it. Talk to whoever they need, interact with whoever they need, right, whatever. So they're an open system. And as being an open system, they are inherently connected to the environment. I said if you take away the environment, you're closed it. So just be with me. If you believe in an open system, you can't take away the environment. And there is a guy called Andreas Angangial, who's also a psychologist. He also was the same time as Pepper. I don't know if they knew each other or whatever. But he said that if you close a system, you have to abstract. You have to take away something. That's really important that we do that when we close, we take away things. So the environment is the thing that we love to take away. Scientists have been doing that for God how long. So assume that the open system will affect the environment, but the environment will also affect the system. It's both ways, it's two ways. They're mutually determinative. So if something bad happened to the environment, something bad is going to happen to the system. Oh, good. So the environment changes the system. I think we all can sort of understand that. When you talk to industry or whatever, we understand that different trends happening is going to affect us. We have to change our business requirements and God knows what. But we just being there also changes the environment. That's a bit of a more of a mental shift. So just having the system there will affect and change the environment. Somebody even have a saying that the environment is defined by the systems it's an environment for. Let me repeat that. The environment is defined by the systems they are an environment for. Which means that if you take away the system, the environment is going to change. So if you, as I work at the telco, and we try to be number 2 in Norway at the moment, if we disappear, well, the market changes completely because they have no challenges anymore. The monopolists are just touring ahead. because there's no challenges to them. So yeah. But yeah, so that is an industrial or the industry environment, which is often referred to as the task environment, which is the close one. But it's more than that, and this is where the social system and thinking is so important, is that we are affected by the global environment, not just the industry. When you get to work, if you read about the election in America and feared for the life of the future, it's going to affect you at work, right? Or if we had, say, if there was a pandemic and suddenly everybody had to work from home, that didn't change much, did it? We still want to work from home, so it changed a lot, right? There's a new generation coming. I'm Gen X. Sorry to out myself on my age. But my way of approaching things is very different from my two sons, which are teenagers. They're Gen Z. Very different. I'm used to have to fix things myself. I just had an argument with my youngest today because he didn't want to go to school because I'm away and I can't make sure that he goes to school. Right? If he doesn't want to do anything, he's not going to do it. So if you hire people from a Gen Z, it's very different from hiring from a Gen X. So it's not just aging, it's how we brought up. So the whole global environment is so important. Yeah, I have to refer to that. So there are techniques for dealing with this more crazy complexity. And in social sciences, especially open systems, we have a few. I'm not going to go into these at all today, different talks for doing that. But I'm just going to mention how you can go about doing this. Because you can't just give up and say, oh, complexity. We're not going to do anything. Right, we can't change anything anyway, and if you change things are going to happen, and we just give up. If we give up, we are in a vortex almost. We just hope to play possum. Hopefully we survive. So we have to do something. And about how the system changes the environment, instead of just adapt to the environment, which is the organistic way of thinking, because then you're all in evolution and all that, and you have to reprogate, and it's natural selection and all that. You actually have to change the system to benefit you, and to make sure that the system survives, or the environment survives. As I said, you are actually then making the environment by being you. So if you are a destructive system in an environment, you break the environment, and then you can break the whole thing. Right? So you have to be active. You have to make sure that the environment moves in the direction that you want it to go. Hopefully, you're not a bad company that just want to ruin everybody. But if you ruin everybody, you ruin it from yourself as well. So, play along. That's one. But it's the other way also. It's really interesting. And this is where the classic complexity, I should probably flip these two, because this is probably what you know more. When you try to adapt, when you learn from the environment, you can't necessarily, you can't look ahead, right? Because it's unpredictable. But you can take small steps. Simon Wardley used the term called crossing the river by feeling the stones. Right? And they, in open system theory, they use the term puzzle learning. And I kind of like that. It's like, if you're laying a puzzle, you don't know what the next puzzle piece is before you have laid the first one. So you need to lay that and then find the next one. That's how you do that. And you take small increments, and there's no 5-year plans here, don't exist, but you need to do something, and you need to start moving. So get away from that analysis paralysis. Whatever you do, it's better than doing nothing, is the idea. So don't forget about option 0, which is doing nothing when you have options for doing anything, because that's actually a choice as well. So this is a good illustration of Emery's open system theory. I put Emery's in front of it because there are different strands of open system theory, which is organicistic. Trond Hjorteland. Anybody know him? He was a German, wasn't he? Austrian? I'm not sure. But he was probably the first one to coin the term open systems. But he was a biologist. So he looked at it. He had a full-on organicistic way of thinking. For him, the environment was there, but it really didn't matter what it was. It's just you acknowledge that it was there, that you had to interact with it. It really didn't. The organism doesn't change the environment. Right? It's not active. That's a very human thing to do, like you mentioned Eduardo in the talk before. Right? It's a humanistic thing to do. All right. Quickly, just to make it even more complicated, in the open system, in a team, for example, there are persons, people. There is a definition in open system theory that says that a person, make it very technically, a person is an open, purposeful system. It's not one you want to use anywhere, but just think about it. It's an open, you as a person is an open system, but you're also purposeful. There's something that you want out of life. So when you go to work, you need to align your purposefulness with the rest of the team, and the rest of the organization, and the rest of the environment, and God knows what. So if you go to work and you don't want to work there because it's horrible and you may create crappy products that you don't believe in and you think it's going to bring out hellfire and brimstone, whatever you're doing, either you're a bad person or you're stuck in an environment that you actually don't feel you belong. So you need to align the purposefulness that you have in the organization. When that is properly aligned, you're going to enjoy your work. You're going to be proud of the work that you're producing. So again, it's the interaction between all these things. So back to this. So the hypothesis said they don't fit in all situations, but you can apply them to different situations. Like when you create a domain model, you probably want to use formalism. Makes sense, right? Because you're creating things. If you're going to design a team, yeah, organism can work, but maybe contextualism is even better because of the time and openness of it all. If you're looking into, if you're actually making a machine, a car, then it would be kind of stupid to use anybody of the else. Maybe the mechanism would work. But Akoff is also clear about, well, maybe you should include synthesis because you want to understand how the car is going to work in an environment. So, be careful about this. But what I want to, as I said, you can use any one of them, but I would clearly vote against mixing them. How can you mix them? If you use one or more in a given situation, you're mixing them. Say, for example, if you have a team, and the team decides, let's say that the team actually have a decision. I just want to be nice. So I say the team decides, we need a project manager here. Right? But we want to decide how things is going to work out. We're going to be self-organizing. But we're going to have a manager that's going to tell us how to do things, or say when we're going to do what. Then we're mixing the mechanistic way of thinking with the contextualism, most likely, organism or organism, right? So we are running the risk of making it bad for all of us. It's even worse, of course, if the manager is put into your team, or somebody else decides that the manager is going to control these teams. Again, the management is probably more likely to use mechanism way of thinking than contextualism. Maybe organism sometimes, but they're probably going to think in mechanism because they believe that if we just lay a good plan, we're going to end up where we want to go. People just have to do the right job, do the job correctly, and get the right people. Yes, sir?
Isn't it exactly the same like you said in the morning?
Yep. Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you said that. Because I love that you had a stab at that. Finally, somebody had the gust. I haven't done it myself, but my first talk here, when I did the business capabilities, I don't know how to go into it, but I said that I really hope you don't treat you assume that your system or that your code is complex. I just threw it out there. I didn't think much of it. I guess I intuitively thought so. Because that's very deterministic. Your code shouldn't just create certain things and go off on a whim because that has a purpose, right? It's a very structured way of doing things. So if we take them, as you said, if you do the structured thing and then force people into that, not good. So I've never felt good about the inverse conway maneuver. And I would highly recommend against it based on what I've learned. Probably there are good examples where it has worked, but then people have accepted it. Oh, actually, 10 minutes. 10 minutes left. All right, any other issues when we can see issues? Let's take formism, since I've sort of underplayed that a little bit all the time here. But say formism, you want to define some entities. I could say customer, but okay, let's say customer. people always end up creating a customer entity, which becomes the big God entity because customer is important and belongs everywhere. But say if you do that, and then you want to reuse it. You have agreed on all the parameters and everything is perfect, and then you have to reuse it. Oh, crap. They need something also there. Oh, and then we need to change it. Oh, we haven't understood the similarity. Oh, what they're talking about sounds like customer. Is it customer? Yes, customer. Let's add another field. Then you're in formalism originally, but you are actually thinking more mechanically or organistically. Because you see that there are interactions between them, and there are connections between things that are part. So you try to mix them. I think that's where we run into those issues. And probably why entities should be local, upon the context, anyone, right? By the way, I think domain-driven design, partly, the tactical patterns are very leaning towards here, while the strategic ones are probably here. And why it's so hard to get them both. Because you get that, then you're really into formalism mind of thinking, and then you flip the page, and then you come to part 2 in this book, in Games' book. You have to swap out your whole world hypothesis when you do that. You have to think differently, suddenly. Again, my hypothesis that that's the case. Why people stop at reading half the book. Because it's such a mind shift when you have to do that. You also hear a lot of talk about predictability versus adaptability. Yeah, the companies, they want to have predictability because that's how they can make money, and the owners are satisfied, and they see that, oh yeah, this is going the right direction, and we're going to meet all the targets and all that stuff. Very much in the mechanistic way of thinking, all right? But Agile claims that they actually wish they used the word because it was actually up for vote, what they were going to call it. Agile 1. What I've heard, number 2 was adaptive. So I wish they actually switched it. Because of Agile, the mindset is adaptability. You're acknowledging that you have to adapt, which means that you're into the contextualism space, most likely. Again, different mindsets. I don't want to use mindset because it sounds so terrible. World hypothesis. Let's use that from now on. One thing from somebody talked about fast flow. That was actually Mikael. Team topologies. There's a lot of focus on fast flow. Can you imagine that people have different interpretation of what fast flow means? No, never. Where do you think that comes from? I think I've given it a hint to what it means. I mean, if you are so believer of mechanism, fast flow is flow of information, flow of work, predominantly, right? It's Jira tasks that have to go through a process. That's fast flow. Output, exactly, yeah. Because there are no context there. Remember, contextualism is up there. There's no context there. So it is just tasks that go through a machine. There's a machine that's producing tasks or giving out tasks, whatever. It's output, yes. But what team topologists try to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's outcome to the customer. You're open. You have to be open. It's talking to the customer. The customer has to actually decide if it's good or not, basically. So then you're full open. Again, so it's very important that we. So if I'm going to summarize, using this again, is that I think we should be conscious about what world hypothesis we have at every given situation, how we think, and what the other one thinks. Because if we use the different one, say for fast flow, we're going to argue a lot, and we're never going to agree. That's what I mean. Why it's a relatively adequate world hypothesis. There fits everywhere. There's no place where a world hypothesis doesn't fit. But this creates a different way of looking at things if you use the one or the other. Or even, as I said, so even I want to go as far, and this is where I find it very interesting and why I get so involved in this, is that I believe if we do acknowledge this, that people have different world hypotheses, we can actually agree more, and we get away from that fighting that we have a lot. Because I think we fight because we look at the world differently. Different mental models, different world hypotheses. So just recognizing that damn architect that I never agree with, if I understand, okay, he's in a mechanistic thinking and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I understand where he's coming from. So let me try to sort of discuss this and use the hypothesis, not necessarily using the terms and all that, but trying. Are you thinking that we're going to reach that target because there are cause and effect, and there's no complexity, there's nothing? Yeah. Maybe we should discuss that instead of getting stuck in that discussion, that yes or no kind of argument thing. Monty Python. This is not an argument. This is right. We get in that sort of type of discussion. So I think just having these actually can provide a tool for you. So it's like a nerdy thing to get into this word hypothesis, but I think they're actually quite useful. Not only for understanding things, but also how you interact with other people and understand why people do what they do. People do try to do good, generally. Even managers try to do good, but they're really stuck in mechanism. Right? So, and also don't mix them. And please, 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 never use the word resource for any person ever again. If I hear anyone use resource for a person, I'm going to come and haunt you. Because resource is, again, mechanistic thinking. You think of them as tangible, fungible resources that you can just replace. So stop using that. In Capra, and we're called Capra, we use the word goats. Because Capra means, it's in Latin for goat. It's just creating a we, and it's more fun, and it's, we don't have to use resource. So if you don't use folks or people, find something else that's fun. All right, I think I'm at the end. Thank you very much.